watch this
On
one.
the 1st of
This is Sunny V2. He went on Joe Rogan, then killed someone 38 days later. So let's see exactly what happened here.
February 2024, Sheldon Johnson appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. 38 days later, he was arrested and charged with murder. It was
I remember
episode
seeing that one.
2096, with Joe Rogan, Sheldon Johnson, and another person named Josh Dubin. Josh had been on the
Piss
podcast
off.
6 different times before, explaining on an earlier episode that he was a lawyer who worked with wrongfully convicted felons.
We're here to get
Okay.
the word out about wrongful convictions.
In 3 out of 6 of Josh's
That's a pretty bad thing, to be
appearances,
honest.
he'd bring the
It happens a lot, and unfortunately, in there a lot of cases there is a bit of a corruption that takes place, or unfairness. Usually it's unfairness, but a lot of times it's just straight up corruption.
these wrongful convicts to tell their story.
He spent 3 decades in jail for murders that he didn't commit.
So when Josh brought in Sheldon Johnson, it seemed this would be another positive episode, but it quickly became apparent that Sheldon was slightly different.
I figured we'd do something a little bit different. Typically, the person sitting to my right is someone that was wrongfully convicted. Sheldon is guilty.
Sheldon had only just been released from a 25-year prison stint, but Josh had
Shit.
brought him on specifically
He didn't kill
as
this
an
dude, did he?
example of someone who'd been given an unfair amount of time, believing Sheldon never deserved his 25 years in prison. Well, you can be the judge of that. Born 1975, Sheldon Johnson grew up in the Martin Luther King Jr. Towers, aka a poverty-stricken housing project in Harlem, New York City.
Okay.
His entire family tree had been in and out of prisons.
My father was incarcerated. He did about 15 years. I was incarcerated. My grandfather was incarcerated. My great-grandfather was a slave. And my son killed somebody when he was 12 years old.
While Sheldon was the only one in his family who had functional hearing.
My mother's deaf. My father's deaf. My sister's deaf. My aunt is deaf. I grew up in a deaf household.
Therefore, his father, a drug dealer, brought Sheldon along to help him translate deals. And by the age of 12, Sheldon had
How was he doing it before then, though? This just made it easier for him. He's like, all right, now I got a kid. Now you can be translating. He's like, what? How did?
joined the exact same line of work.
I don't know.
I started selling drugs. Guy offered me an opportunity.
He has to bring a
work out,
notepad
and I
with
would
him.
just stand there, and eventually I just slowly moved up the ranks. It turned me into this person that I was never meant to be.
As a result, he began to rack up charges.
Driving without a license, standing on the corner, little small petty drug cases.
And spent most of his teens in the Rikers Island prison, although it'd be after he
Isn't Rikers Island like a fucking hardcore prison? That's not the Alcatraz prison, though, I think. Maybe it is. I don't think so. No, I think the Alcatraz prison's somewhere else in the world. I don't know. But, yeah, I thought Rikers is like for murderers and shit.
his release at the age of 21,
I guess he is now.
that things went downhill badly.
But that was just
he
small
committed
shit.
2 different armed robberies, receiving a sentence of 50 years in prison, which Josh argued was incredibly unfair, given only one person received minor injuries.
He got hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he had 2 stitches, and they gave me 25 years for that case.
Did you hit him in the head?
No.
Regardless, prison is where Sheldon realized he had to turn his life around,
It was at that moment I really said I have to change my life. I just can't do this.
beginning a prison journal about hope, change, and reform.
Obviously, that's supposed to be the case, but a lot of times prisons aren't. They don't facilitate that. And at least if they do, it's the general community or the like. I guess the general situations of the prison are very hard for them, so they just kind of end up reverting to worse stuff. End up getting more time and more charges, and it's just a perpetual cycle. And then people are just like, "Oh, it's free food, it's free housing, I don't have to be out in the cold." I know people in real life who get locked up on petty crimes year round just to be locked away for the winter, so they can be homeless during the summer because they don't want to worry about the cold.
In his entry letter to my younger self, it explained
Like they're not like friends or anything, but like, yeah, I know of people who do that.
Just because you're surrounded by violence does not mean that violence is the way to solve your problems. Sheldon, 2 wrongs do not make a right. Violence only begets violence. Learn how to respond and not react. In a different entry he'd state, as we know, I'm currently in prison, which I've learned does one of 2 significant things to its occupants. Brings the best out of them or the worst.
I saw individuals who were at their worst, and I saw guys who were at their best. The guys who were at their best were guys who were involved in education, post-secondary education programs.
Realizing the role model prisoners were those with an education, Sheldon spent years educating himself.
I got into school, I got my GED, and then I went on to obtain my bachelor's in behavioral science from Mercy. I stopped smoking weed, I stopped smoking cigarettes. I started working in the law library. I discovered that I had a knack for complicated things, case law, and I was actually helping guys get out of prison.
He'd further add to his journal, I have grown
He's turning his life around
in these 14 years, when I could have easily withered away. I've learned that I love Shakespeare, that I love acting, that I love writing, that I enjoy reading philosophy, that I love reading criminal law, that I love writing legalese. Sheldon had changed his life to such an extent, BuzzFeed advocated for his release back in 2016. He became a model inmate, said David Roth, the prison social worker. His days were so full that he went to bed exhausted and fell asleep immediately. As a result of his good behavior, Sheldon was released after 25 years of his 50-year sentence, appearing on a podcast called Success After Lockdown, on which he'd implied that he'd never go back to prison.
I'm reflecting, I'm saying to myself like, yo, I can't spend the next 50 years like this.
When he'd appear on Joe Rogan 1 month later, Sheldon again implied that he wouldn't go back to jail.
Individuals who have been shown to acquire associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees are like 92% less likely to return back to prison.
With Josh using Sheldon as an example, that change was always possible.
How do you make change happen? He's living it and making it happen. Look at this beautiful mind and how he articulates himself.
He began working for the Queen's Defenders, helping troubled youth.
I'm trying to catch these kids before they fall, and I want to show them the way.
And even began to consider more formal education.
Sheldon asked me, should I go to law school before we came here?
In the process, expressing his disbelief that he'd
seems like he's doing good. Why would he kill some dude? Like, what?
Just came from the bowels of hell. 25 years in prison, and now I'm in the sky above the clouds in the heavens, headed to a destination to talk about change and to talk about all of the things that brought me to this place today.
Joe Rogan even posted a clip titled, "Sentenced to 50 years, Sheldon Johnson decided to turn his life around." However, Sheldon would make one final important claim.
But this is how fast your life can change from just one simple mistake.
This became reality only 38 days later.
It's very true. It's very true.
His life around after spending most of his adult life in prison. In fact, last year he started working for the Queen's Public Defender's Office. Well, now he is accused of killing a man and then dismembering his body.
Sheldon was childhood friends with a man named Colin Small, with whom he'd also spent over 10 years in prison. Therefore, upon Sheldon's release, Small was helping Johnson get back on his feet. However, at some point, their friendship took a turn. On the 6th of March 2024, police received a call from a tenant who lived in New York, claiming to have heard 2 gunshots from Colin Small's apartment, as well as a voice begging, "Please don't, I have a family." Police drove over to the flat and knocked on the door, only to find Sheldon Johnson inside, who claimed that Colin Small had apparently gone upstate. Well, police searched the apartment and found half of Colin Small's body.
Yeah, they can't, so, especially like with reports like that, unless they confirm that there's multiple people that are okay in the residence, then they will leave. Like, I know I've watched a lot of videos where they're like, bro, like, you know, we know there's a domestic situation between a male and a female, like, we are not leaving until we see the female, like, we have probable cause, like, whatever. And they'll go on and on, like, the police will not leave, they'll get all kinds of warrants, like, they're getting inside that house. So you can't just say, oh yeah, by the way, like, he's upstate, sorry, come back tomorrow. It's not gonna work. They're going in the house.
Back at Sheldon's apartment, in addition to concrete and a Tyvek suit, CCTV
Shit, he was going.
Colin's apartment.
That's like some Breaking Bad. I was gonna say Jeffrey Dahmer, but he didn't really wear suits, so I don't know who else wore suits. But that was like a Breaking Bad looking suit.
showed Sheldon Johnson entering and exiting, trying to conceal his identity with a range of different disguises. In one of these stills, he's seen wearing the exact same jacket as he was in a photo he took for the and exiting, trying to
Dude put on a wig. He put on, and what is this? Is this his, it just looks like a hat. Looks like a cap that's just turned backwards.
to conceal his
What
identity
the
with a
fuck?
range of different disguises.
He put
in
on
one
a
of these
wig?
stills, he's seen wearing the exact
That is
same
crazy.
jacket as he was in a photo he took for the Queen's Defenders.
Yeah.
Sheldon was therefore arrested and charged with Colin's murder,
Yeah,
screaming,
look at this
"I'm
dude."
innocent," as he was placed into the cop car.
Yeah, yeah, I
Sheldon
bet.
maintained this innocence all the way to
I bet.
court.
Yesterday, Sheldon Johnson pleaded not guilty to the charges. He had quite a few supporters inside
Wow.
the courtroom.
As the comments on his episode changed overnight. Imagine being locked up for being wronged by the system for over 25 years, only to prove that the system was right. Amazing.
Oh,
The
yeah?
judge who gave him 50 years must feel pretty smart right now. I really believed I was gonna die in prison. Well, you're not wrong, buddy. Sheldon's own father stated, "I'm surprised my son was arrested. I was shocked. He learned and studied in prison for 26 years. He is a good man.
Yeah, like-
He was doing work in a law office. There were no problems."
And
but
that
I
goes to show too, like this dude was in prison for 26 years, completely turned his life around. Like it's possible. It's completely possible. So anybody who's in like a bad position, or you know, maybe you've been in prison yourself, spit the fuck everywhere. Anyways, maybe you've been in prison yourself, but you can turn your life around. It's not the end of the road. It's not gonna end, you know, unless you're 85 and you're laying in a hospital bed waiting for them to pull the plug. It's not the end, dude. Like life goes on. It will continue. It does get better as long as you put in the effort. This dude studied in prison for 26 years, turned his life around, became fucking defendant officer, like whatever the fuck the term was, or whatever. But that's insane. And then he just goes and, you know, throws it out the window just because, oh, you know, who knows the reason? A reason wasn't even given. He just killed the dude that was helping him get back on his feet. Like, what? This guy must have
doubt
problems.
nobody was as shocked as Josh Dubin. He ended Sheldon Johnson's episode stating,
I'm very thoughtful in who I bring on. I think this was one of the best ones yet.
but is still yet to talk publicly since Sheldon's new allegations. Joe, on the other hand, talked about it recently.
He was guilty before, and we knew he was guilty, but he got 50 years.
Right.
And then he was talking about he turned his life around, and this, like, a month
Yeah.
after he was on the podcast,
Yeah.
cut some dude's head off. Homie didn't understand new HD
Yeah,
security cameras.
like that's crazy,
Theorizing that
dude.
prison had only made him worse.
Was that because
Wow.
he spent 25 fucking years in
A
jail,
month
which is
after.
an insane amount of time
Yeah.
to be locked up in a prison, and then
That is
expect
crazy.
to acclimate.
There's one
That's so crazy. What, like? I wonder why he did it though.
On the 1st of February
Because-
2020,
2 stitches.
You know, he spends 26 years in prison getting better, turning his life around. He's working for the Queen's Defenders, and then a month later he dismembers a dude. That is insane, though. Holy. Surprised I'm not subscribed to Sonny already, but yeah, go check him out if you haven't already. He's obviously got tons of subscribers, but everybody knows Sonny.